Jacob Rosenbaum, welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Thank you guys for having me.
We are really blessed to have you. And so I have great news for our folks. We had a guest co-host, and as always, he will be substantially better than Matt Sabatello. So Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself to folks, because they will have just heard your episode. Your episode will be published shortly before this episode is.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to be here again so soon, and to hear Jacob's story. It sounds there's a lot of similarities to what happened with me. And for those that, if they haven't heard, I was diagnosed with Lyme disease in my late 20s, and I'm from Minnesota, and so tick infested area, and I was treating Lyme and other chronic infections for over 2 years, bedridden, and very, very sick, but have regained my health, and I've shared some awesome tips and hacks and tricks that I use to get better, and how that affected me. So I'm definitely excited to have be co-host on the show, and have our guest here tell about his experience.
Yeah, so just to put a little more pressure on you, Ryan, you are the I want our audience to know that you are the person that went from guest to co-host faster than anyone else. So make sure you hold up your end of the bargain here, my brother.
All right, I'll do my best.
All right.
Go.
So Jacob, first share with our folks where you're calling in from.
Sure, of course. I'm calling in from Boise, Idaho.
And how long have you been a resident of the beautiful city of Boise, Idaho?
Yeah, as we were just talking about before we went live, been out here for about 3 years, and it's been a phenomenal time.
And so build out a little bit more about your background. So since you've only been there for 3 years, give us more about where you are before you moved to Boise, from your childhood forward.
Yeah, well, my path has been quite a zigzag. Before I was in Idaho, I was in Virginia. The area that I grew up is actually the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. It's kind of the northwest corner of the state, in a county called Rappahannock County, very rural area. And so that's where I actually grew up. Before that, I was in the Bay Area. And before that, I was in Washington, D.C. Before that, I was in Richmond, Virginia. And then before that, I was in Rappahannock County. So I've kind of done both coasts and in the middle, and been extremely fortunate to work in acupuncture clinics on both sides of the country. So yeah, we've been a lot of places, and we certainly love it here. And I think we have a move coming up, within the next year. So we're trying to decide where we're going to go from here. From here, it might be back to Virginia or back towards California, one of the two.
All right. So so before you continue with your nomadic life, why don't you share with us what you're doing there in Boise? So you did begin to tease that you have a particular type of expertise that I know folks are going to want to learn more about. Acupuncture is an important topic that we touch on, but probably not in the kind of detail we will be able to with you. So talk to us about about professionally where you are right now.
Yeah, well, so currently I run a clinic. It's called Treasure Valley Acupuncture, and it's one of the biggest clinics in the Boise area, and it's been a huge honor. I'm extremely fortunate. We've worked really hard. When I got here, I just remember thinking, gosh, I hope I meet some good people, and if I could set up a small clinic and just have 15 patients a week, that would be perfect. And it's been an extremely fortunate and guided process to where I am now. And so now I'm in a facility with 7 rooms. I've employees, see about 60 patients a week. So stay very busy, and it's extremely fulfilling and rewarding. So yeah, I just am thankful every day to be able to do the work. And I know we'll get into this later, but it was acupuncture was the modality that I felt, one of the modalities I should say, was so helpful to me through my Lyme disease journey. So that was what spurred me to go to acupuncture school in my 20s.
Well, so you've given us a little bit of your transformation, right? Already.
Yeah,
so,
starting to jump ahead.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Good. So give us an overview of acupuncture. And
oh boy.
Again, and we're going to build this out together, but just give us an overview of acupuncture and why you believe perhaps why acupuncture has become so popular. As an old guy, there were no acupuncture professionals that I was aware of during my youth and my early adult life, but I can tell you that acupuncture is something that at least my contemporaries discuss all the time for various reasons. And I'd like to get your sense of first, what is acupuncture generally, and why do you think it's become a modality of choice for so many people, in modern America?
Yeah, well, those are great questions. So I guess I'll start with your second question. Really what we're seeing in the medical world in modern day is this integration of modalities. So I think at one point traditionally it was allopathic medicine, Western medicine on one side, and then what we would call the name changes: holistic medicine, adjunct therapies, integrative therapy, whatever you want to call it. I think probably the most accurate description would be we call it integrative medicine. There's this integration of these two styles of medicine, and we're seeing a great acceptance across the board. I think because the proof is in the pudding. So out here in Idaho, in the local hospitals, actually a friend of mine runs the acupuncture program at St. Luke's Hospital, and so there's some great examples of very traditional. I believe, religious-based hospitals that are then, having a whole acupuncture and integrated medical department. So that's very cool. And then as far as explaining what is acupuncture, that's actually a big joke in acupuncture school, is that if you ask every instructor what does acupuncture do, how does it work, you get a different answer from each person. So I don't know if you want me to jump into talking about some of the mechanisms and some of my opinion on the mechanisms.
We'd like your opinion. We're going to build out the Lyme piece separately, but just give us an overview of your definition
Sure.
of acupuncture.
Yeah. And, I'll try and keep it brief. I really enjoy this conversation, this topic, because I spent some time working on designing a course, which translates traditional Chinese medical terminology into Western medical terminology, which I think is very helpful. It doesn't capture the whole spirit of acupuncture and the whole power of acupuncture. And quite frankly, might piss off some of the old school acupuncturists. They don't want to translate it, because I think you lose some of the magic and specialness of acupuncture when all you do is talk about things in allopathic medical terms. But I think it's important that we do this because I've actually listened to podcasts with acupuncturists where they were asked, how does acupuncture work? And they say, well, it balances your qi. And that was their answer. And if you don't speak Chinese, you're not familiar with the Chinese concepts of qi and yin and yang. If we talk about qi and yin and yang to most people in the West, it sounds a little bit woo-woo. But then they go and get a treatment. They say, wow, I feel so much better. It's obviously it did something. So that was kind of my introduction to acupuncture. As I would get treatments, and I was just blown away how a few needles in my wrist would help my heart rhythm normalize, because I was having very bad heart arrhythmia with Lyme, which is quite scary. So that kind of caused me to ask the question, well, how does this work? And so that question was not easy to answer, led to me doing an apprenticeship, going to school, et cetera. But I'll do my best to explain a few of the modalities in a nutshell. And so I think if we look at acupuncture, how it works at a very high level, it's this concept of bringing homeostasis back to your body. So there's nothing on the needle. You're not putting anything into your body. From a Western medicine perspective, when you place a needle into human tissue, you stimulate nerve tissue. When nerve tissue is stimulated, it releases something called neuropeptides. That causes an increase in circulation. I call it vasodilation, widening of the blood vessels. So one possible interpretation is that acupuncture causes blood flow in a targeted area of the body. And blood flow is essential for any healing, repair, detoxification, any metabolic function. Blood flow is the vehicle that brings oxygen to an injury site. So whether it's a physical injury, an illness, inflammation in your intestinal lining, for me, it was inflammation in the pericardium, the sac around the heart. By vasodilating the area, you accelerate the healing process. So, this is a very Western take on what acupuncture is doing, but we have to be able to understand from a scientific perspective how placing needles in the body causes this really some wonderful effects, this regulation of the system. It increases the body's ability to regulate itself. And this is one of the big ones. If we look at the word qi, very confused word, and there's probably 50 to 100 definitions of qi. One possible translation would be, it's vital life force. What this could be saying is oxygenated blood. Oxygen is essential for ATP. ATP is metabolic energy. For any cellular function, you need oxygen, and glucose makes ATP. So when you have an area of disease, heart arrhythmia, constipation, injured shoulder, if you do acupuncture on the body, you target blood flow to the area. Perhaps the old school Chinese medicine acupuncture would say we're correcting the qi of that area, of that organ, or of that joint. I think the more modern Western acupuncturists would say we are increasing oxygen-rich arterial blood to the site, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's understandable for you guys. Yep.
It is. So give us the next piece of it though, right? We are energetic beings.
Correct. Yeah.
And as energetic beings, we of course will need to have an alteration of our energy if we're suffering an illness or an injury. So talk to us more about the chi, because I'd like you to build that out just a little bit more so that we can talk about not just the physiological elements, but also the spiritual elements of this as well, or the energetic elements as well.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you want to. I often, when I'm talking with a doctor or a podcast or something, I'll start with the Western medicine to see if they want to go beyond that. My personal opinion and my personal experience as a patient and clinically is that the real power of acupuncture is beyond the physiological increasing blood flow. There's much more to it. And, my favorite teacher is very clear. It says, all disease starts in the spirit. So having the ability to treat the spirit is huge. And so when a lot of people come to me in the acupuncture clinic with elbow pain, and you talk to them, and it's like, oh, actually I have really bad anxiety and I don't sleep and there's depression, these things. So I'll often be treating people. I'll work on their immediate issue, but even more importantly, and really where my passion lies, is I'll also at the same time do treatments, multiple layers of treatment in one session to treat the spirit. And so that's certainly my belief that all disease starts in the spirit for sure. And so there's a whole series, too many to even mention, variety of protocols, and also just ways of treating where you can kind of build the protocol out depending on what's presenting in the patient, where you're addressing, I think the easiest way to translate would just be energetic imbalances, diseases of the spirit, blockages, we could use lots of different words to kind of explain what we're talking about here that are more subtle. But from this lens of viewing the body, the energetic structure of the body informs the function of the physical structure of the body. And we see this clinically almost 100% of the time, is that, a great example would be people that have chronic pain in their traps and their neck and headaches. And they go and they get massages and chiropractic, and the massage therapist is grinding and they're saying, wow, these knots just won't come out. And from the Chinese medicine perspective, the internal mechanisms inform the structure of the body. So you can work from the outside and it provides relief for like 4 hours. But really, we need to correct what's happening inside. So acupuncture is very, it's a totally different paradigm. It's these concepts of venting things out of the body, tonifying, which would be strengthening, or clearing. These are actually herbal terms that are applied to acupuncture to understand what the points are doing. So there's herbs that will strengthen, and then there's herbs that will drain or clear, if you will. So we can apply that same look or that same interpretation to acupuncture points that clear heat, points that strengthen different organs, points that clear blockages, and so on. So it's a whole independent system of viewing the body and then the energetic body underneath the physical body. And so the way I like to treat is actually do both. I'll do tons of, sports medicine acupuncture on the shoulder, and then also treat the energetic system beneath, which is, in my opinion, the most important part. So hopefully that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And I can't wait to hear Ryan build that out with you as it relates to your particular journey. But let me walk it back a little bit and get some insight into what your childhood was like, and give us a build up to where you spent your childhood and when you first started to become symptomatic.
Okay. So my childhood was extremely wonderful. I'm an extremely lucky person in so many different ways. So I'm full of gratitude for that. So the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in a little town called the Plains, Virginia. It's a little village. There's maybe about 100 people. And then at the age of 10, we moved to Rappahannock County, where I then spent my formative years and my teenage years. So yeah, early childhood was very picturesque. My dad worked, my mom stayed at home, raised myself and my sister, who's 11 months younger than me. We're super tight. And it was a small and wonderful community. I was an extremely sensitive little kid. So it's funny, before doing this podcast, I was just working with a kind of like a mentor, therapist, guide, I would say. And I was just talking about this, so it's funny to talk about it again. And it's an honor. And so I was extremely sensitive as a kid. I feel like I was really happy, really positive. I'm thankfully just constitutionally geared towards positivity, which has helped carry me through many fires in my life. But I was also really empathic. I think I was taking on a lot of pain from other people, from my mother, from a variety of people around me. So as a kid, I actually did suffer quite a bit. Had a lot of stomach problems, had a lot of emotional challenges. So life is complicated, right? It's not a good or a bad. It's that there was all of the above was occurring. An extremely happy, wonderful, and gifted childhood, as well as a lot of emotional challenges as well. And so then from there, moving out to Rappahannock County, things changed. I got a little bit older, made a group of really good buddies, and I think once I got into my early teens, I just became a little tornado, and it's probably, part of that was because I was pushing down a lot of emotional pain. So I was focused on partying, and the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia is a really unique place. It's full of artists, hippies, really talented people, and rednecks, all kind of mixed in together. And so my parents were more on the hippie side of the community, and so there weren't much rules. We pretty much ran wild. My dad was a gun dealer. My mom was a school teacher. I had the keys to Dad's gun safe, and we had unlimited supply of marijuana and all sorts of moonshine and whatnot. And so just pushed really hard. Every limit I could possibly come across, I pushed it, and to level of maniac level, I think. And the guys I was rolling with, my brothers at the, still my brothers to this day, we were all right there together. So it was a little band of feral children in the Appalachian Mountains, if you can imagine that, with the most loving and wonderful, supportive parents around us that couldn't really control us. So this is my perception of how it went down. And then, I got sick, really sick, when I was 18, and that stopped me in my tracks. Redirected me. Yeah, completely.
Let's pause there for a second, Jacob, because
Sure.
Because you talked about your feral band of brothers.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things we've learned on this podcast is that Virginia is a tick endemic community, a tick endemic state. We've had many guests on this podcast who were raised in Virginia or live in Virginia. We see a sort of a different flavor, which is interesting, from the folks in Virginia. Like most people who come on this podcast, you folks in Virginia knew little, if anything, about ticks and tick diseases. And what we see a lot more in Virginia than we see here in New York, interestingly, is Lone Star tick bites and gal, right?
Oh yeah.
So first share with us, as the feral kid who is running through the woods and having all the freedom that your parents allowed you to have to live the life that you lived. Did you know anything about ticks and tick diseases, and were you taking any steps to protect yourself from getting sick?
Yeah, we knew about tick and tick diseases. I had many friends that got sick. I know many people in that community, this wonderful community, that are currently sick with, the horrible red meat allergies, I believe comes from the Lone Star tick. Tons of my friends got sick. I went to high school with kids that get the pick line, but, I was just not afraid. I was just fearless and just out of my mind. And so the tick disease was the last thing I was worried about. I was more worried about police officers and parents. That was my only concern. And so my dad, very intuitive of him, would always tell me, hey man, you got to check yourself for ticks, watch out for ticks. And I always said, my dad has no fear. He's not afraid of anybody or anything, except for ticks. And right before I got sick, it was coming up a lot for him. So I don't know if there was some sense that he was getting, but we were certainly seeing it more in our community. And I just was thinking, oh wow, that's crazy, but that would never be me. I'm certainly invincible, especially all the things I have gotten away with on a daily basis can reaffirm and confirm my invincibility. So yeah, it was quite a shock to then get hit with it. But looking back, it's just so obvious. We were in the woods, 5 hours a day,
So you indicated that you had gotten sick around, you said 18. Now, was that when you first started to become symptomatic, or is that when you became so sick that you couldn't ignore it?
Both, both. Yeah. I just got it, and I think my body, I was very out of touch in my body. I was drinking a ton of coffee, so when I was 18, if we flash forward, I had arrived in Richmond, Virginia. I went to VCU. It's a school of 30,000 kids in the middle of downtown Richmond, which is a pretty awesome town. It's like a little Brooklyn plopped right in the middle of Virginia. And so, it was time to party. So I was not thinking about my body. There was, I'm sure there were tons of signs, headaches, fatigue, joint pain, but yeah, I just wrote it off as lifestyle induced issues. But then the winter of 2009, that winter, I just became extraordinarily sick, massive fevers and yeah, just as the sickest I'd ever been in my entire life, actually. I think it was a combination of strep throat and Lyme. And usually we see this from a clinical perspective. Other pathogens, roll with Lyme, and when your immune system's down, this is an opportunistic pathogen. It will then come forward in totality. So it's very sneaky. It will kind of wait until you're vulnerable. So I think that's what happens. And then very quickly, I started having heart arrhythmia. But I was still locked into my lifestyle of party every day, substances every day. We are here on planet Earth to have as much fun as possible. That's why I'm here. Let's go. Nothing's going to hold me back. And so it took about 4 months of, even eating a piece of chocolate or smoking a cigarette would just send my heart just out of control. So, it was something that I tried very hard to ignore, but then after feeling like I had to go to the hospital multiple times, it was like, okay, something's going on. So then began the journey of trying to figure out why had my body just totally crapped out on me, and so that started the exploration process.
So Jacob, do you recall having suffered any tick bites during the course of your life, and specifically?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I would go to the barber and they would be cutting my hair. And they would just be like ticks in the back of my head. And my poor mother would be like, oh my God, he's not neglected. He's taken care of very well, but he just plays in the woods. But at the time, I was dating a girl. I was living with her. Her family had Lyme disease. Her sister had it. And then, she had issues, but it hadn't been diagnosed. And so I believe, there was some question as to, did I end up actually getting the exposure that then took hold, because exposure does not mean contraction. This is very clear in a lot of pathogens, was actually from her. And so, I'm not quite sure whether it was one of the mini ticks or whether it was cohabitating and living and being intimate with somebody that had an active infection. It's hard to say.
Well, all of the above.
All of the above, man. Yeah. It's clear it was placed in my path for a reason. So I guess if it really came from her, I should send her a text and thank her. That would be the joke.
So so you're in college at the time you're getting sick.
Yeah.
What was your career path? I know it was a party path.
The career path was federal prison. There was no career path. Yeah, there was no career path. I had no direction and no clear path whatsoever.
So you were still feral.
Oh, for sure. And, there was this theme that my band of blood brothers, when we all got out of the Appalachian Mountains, which was a very protected environment where you could just go wild and push it. And there were essentially no consequences. If you get arrested, your parents would come pick you up, and that's pretty much it. The people, the teachers at school and the local police were trying to handle our group, but I don't think they really could. But then when people left that community and went out to the cities, that was when everyone started, many of my friends hit the wall very hard. And I actually have, 15 guys, anywhere 13 to 15 people, I should say, that I know from that community that are no longer with us, from a pretty small group. So, it was, live by the sword, die by the sword type of lifestyle. Yeah.
So you don't have a rudder. You're in college. You're living the party life. You feel like hell, and now you start seeing doctors. So talk to us about the medical professionals you saw, and what kind of advice you were getting from them.
Just and this is you've heard this story 400 times. You've done 400 of these podcasts. It's a total goose chase. I probably went to 6 different doctors, infectious disease specialists. I was told that I damaged my heart from partying, which is odd because I was the captain of my cross country team. I was a super good runner, just naturally gifted with my cardiovascular ability to do cross country running in the mountains, and while still smoking cigarettes. So I was very fit. And then I had this doctor, I was 19, it just said, well, I think, you were in your prime and now you're not, and this is just a new normal. And that was just crushing. And looking back on that, especially as a medical provider now, I just think, wow, that is just so crazy. But this is what we were running into. And unlike Ryan, he was saying he was going online, and we were talking, before we started recording, he was saying he was going online and looking at all this information. This was 2008. So for me, there wasn't that much of a resource. I mean, it was just starting to, the Lyme literate community was just starting to be present. And so it was.
But Jacob, when did you first think Lyme? I mean, of course, in order to be able to get online and start researching Lyme, you'd have to think Lyme. When did that first?
It wasn't even me. It was my mother. My mother, who saved my life more times than I can count. Who's just one of my favorite person of all time. She said, you know what, you need to get a Lyme test. So I went and got the standard traditional blood test, which is only about 30% accurate, after being in the fight for maybe 8 months of just thinking I'm going to die because my heart's not working. Right. And thank God, the Lyme test just came back positive, and it was a shock. It wasn't even a thought through my mind, that it could be Lyme, but thankfully my mom said, well, let's just test him.
Yeah, so I mean, we've heard that many times. It's part of Matt's journey. For example, my regular co-host, it was actually his mom who thought Lyme first as well. Despite being feral, you have a very influential mother. You follow her advice, and you go for the Lyme disease test, and it comes back positive. So,
yes.
And Ryan's going to start to take you from here, what were your thoughts? What were your initial thoughts when you received the Lyme disease diagnosis?
Well, by the time I received the Lyme disease diagnosis, it was about 8 months later, but it had been a long 8 months. And so at that point, my lifestyle had totally changed. Just as we were talking about mass experience, I kind of dropped out of the friend community, the activities I'd done, by about month 4, I just crashed out of almost everything I was doing, and was just kind of sitting in the rubble of my previous life, trying to figure out, how to just physically survive. So by the time it was, 8 months into that, it was a rough 8 months, and I got that diagnosis, and it was just, it didn't seem like as big of a deal as it was. I thought, okay, well, this is a path to follow. But by that point, I was having major existential questions of, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to survive. And, what is the point of life? What am I doing here? And, I was really wrestling with that. And so when mom said, oh yeah, it came back positive, it just kind of, I was like, okay, and that was it. I was just so deep in the experience, it didn't even really register that, oh, this is like a little glimmer of light. This might be a path to healing. It felt like healing was not in the cards. I was wrapping things up.
Yeah. So Jacob, I'm blown away so far by what you're saying, because I don't know what it is, if it's some kind of fate or destiny, or the way people come together from extraordinary circumstances and events in life. But I'm finding so many similarities to my own journey, my personality, and you. I'm also an empath. I grew up kind of a sensitive guy, and so I just find it incredible that you're here right now telling your story, and as you're talking, I'm hearing a lot of stuff that makes me think of myself. And so, like, even my diagnosis took about 8 months to figure out, right? And so now, after you heard that news, after you found out it was Lyme disease, I mean, were you, because when I found out, at first I was relieved because you have an answer, right? Like, well, I finally know what's going on. And then I start to research and go on Dr. Google, and then I become terrified. So
Sure.
How did you feel after that? And tell us a little about how many, what type of, what was your thoughts next, and what you were going through in that moment?
Dude, it's embarrassing to say this, but I remember this so clearly. I could not do this podcast without telling you the truth, which is, I remember writing on my calendar that I had by my bed, okay, I got Lyme, I got antibiotics, and I remember I said I can have a beer in 1 month. That's what, so it was like, I can get back to my community, my family, my brothers, the lifestyle, and so it was, I had written on, I might have just written the word party or one beer, something like this, on my calendar. And I just remember a month went by looking at that calendar, and I was just like, oh fuck, this is like, I'm not getting out of this, and so I was just trying to really go down to the valley right around the time that I got on antibiotics. And it wasn't, some people that get on antibiotics and they start feeling better quickly. That was not the case for me. I mean, it was intense, and we can get into some of the experiences where I was sure I had arrived at the end of my life, but would then wake up the next day and still be here. So, it was,
Right.
but the initial thoughts were like, all right, I can get out of this, hell and get back to the fun,
I had the same feeling. I
yeah,
think a lot of people think that right away. They go, "Oh, cool! This is just like a regular bacterial infection. I'll just take some
yeah,
antibiotics. It'll go away. Life will be good again. I can go back to how I was living." But what you don't realize is the way you were living is why you got into this state in
exactly.
the first place.
And
And so,
thank God, it was a multi-year process, because it took me just over a year to um, start to transform. No, forced lifestyle change, rehab program, um, different change of location, military school. None of that would have changed my behavior. And so, really, it was like getting locked into a just absolute epic spiritual, physical beatdown for about 2 years, allowed me to rebuild, and strip away all the person that I kind of created, or grown
and
into
in
at
the
that time.
and in the beginning, did you fight that? Did you go, you know what?
Oh,
I'm not gonna slow down. Like I'll do what I need to do to get better,
oh,
but
for sure, man.
I'm not stopping.
No, dude. I mean, yeah, I mean, it was like a year and a half in. At this point, I'm in treatment, and I'm still staying up till 4 in the morning. I was smoking Newports, chasing girls, just romping around Richmond, still trying to do the thing, just going to parties sober, and then end up being a designated driver. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't until like year 2 where I was like, okay, I need to learn about food. I guess I can't just eat chicken nuggets. I need to learn about nutrition and heal. And really, we could get into it later, but it was one man, my acupuncturist at the time, who was the guiding force for me in learning all that. But yeah, I fought it like heck, for sure, and dragged this experience longer than it probably needed to be honest.
Well, I think you were just working with the resources that you had at the time and the knowledge that you had, which is very limited, I'm sure. And even back then, it's like I don't know. I mean, if now there's so much more online about this that I had a lot more to guide me from all the materials out there. But back then, you probably were looking at quite not as much help out there or as much expert resources and advice. Is there anybody that initially you learned from? For me, it was like Dr. Buhner, or not Dr., but Mr. Buhner.
Yeah, Stephen Buhner. Yep.
Yep. So Buhner.
Dude, I didn't have the mental capacity to learn shit. I was just totally, not only in the fight, but also a young, teenage boy that was just not very undisciplined. So, thankfully, my mom was there. She was emailing Stephen Buhner. I believe Stephen Buhner since passed away. Rest in peace to him. What an amazing man who helped so many
Yep.
people. And I have his book and his some of his formulas in my clinic now. So thank you to Stephen Buhner. But yeah, at the time, my mom read his book, would email him, and so really, I just said, my hands were completely off the wheel, and then it was for the people around me, mostly my parents, and the healers that I found, after going to 6 different Western medicine doctors, with fairly unsuccessful results. I found one that was helpful and would give me a long-term dose of doxycycline and just do blood work on me every 2 months to make sure that my body was handling it okay. But beyond that, it was actually these real incredible healers, including this acupuncturist and my parents, that guided me in the beginning. Yeah.
So it looks like you tried the traditional route first. I call it
Oh yeah.
the scorched earth approach. The
Oh yeah.
nuclear option of the antibiotics. Let's kill these suckers, get them out of our body. How did that work out for you? Tell about. It looks like you tried doxycycline for quite a while.
Oh yeah.
How,
Yeah.
how
I mean,
how
I
was
was
that experience? And tell us
well.
a
It
little about
just
your treatment journey now.
Yeah. It was just I took 400 milligrams of doxycycline a day. So oh no, I took 200 milligram doxycycline pills a day, so a very big dose.
Wow.
Yeah, and 3, I think it was 500 milligram amoxicillins a day. So I mean, massive antibiotics. So I did that for almost 2 years, and then I got off the amoxicillin and just stuck with the doxycycline, I think, after about a year. And so when I first started, it didn't pull me from the fire right away. It just slowly made it so I could function. I was still having tons of chest pains, heart arrhythmia would kick up, headaches, fevers at night, swelling and joint pain, just major malaise. But it made it so that I could walk up the stairs without feeling like I had to go to the hospital. So it definitely got me to a functional point. But when I would try and go off of it, pretty quickly, within about a week, I would just start just crashing. So I was just stuck on doxycycline for a long time. Yeah, until I found these other modalities that I used, integratively together.
And at the time, who was it that, remind me again, I don't know if you had covered this, but who was it that prescribed, and who were you under the care of at that? Was it your primary doctor? Was it infectious disease?
Yeah, it was. So initially, my primary care doctor is an amazing man, Dr. John McHugh. He's still practicing in he's in Little Washington in Virginia. He was the one that found the Lyme test, but that found the Lyme. He did the test at the request of my mother, but he then referred me to some folks, and yeah, after going through a string of these doctors, not getting anywhere, many frustrating appointments, I opted not to do the PICC line, so that kind of ended my relationship with the infectious disease doctor. I found Dr. Richard Falkenstein, who's an absolute badass. He's like he's still practicing in a town called Middleburg, Virginia. He is I think he was a medic in Vietnam. I mean, he's old. He's an older guy, and he was very. Thank God he knew about Lyme. He knew you need more than a 14-day supply of 200 milligrams of doxycycline. So he was initially the one that was, giving me the doxycycline and then giving me blood work every couple of months to make sure my body was handling it. And then we're doing EKGs and just saying, okay, like you're stable, you're okay, just keep taking doxycycline, you're going to get through this. But after a long period of time, it just seemed like I was just going to have to take doxycycline for the rest of my life. I remember just going to the beach and just turning into just a strawberry so fast, what that does to you. So
heat sensitivity. Yep.
It just smashes your gut flora. But, at that point, it was just like, hey, let's just take this stuff. And because without it, I was way worse off. So yeah. And then I can talk about when I finally got in with some of these other healers, if you want to go into that from here. Would that be
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind of walk us through the timeline of like when you were trying things, and because I did so much research that I kind of scared myself away from the antibiotic route and didn't want to, crash my gut. And for me, I was always in my head about what do I really have going on, because I had first taken IGeneX test and, I had just kind of a slight positive, but it wasn't like CDC positive. And so I ended up taking 10 different Lyme and co-infection tests from various labs. And so I couldn't stand not knowing the truth for sure. Like that's just me. I'm a truth seeker. And so I want to know exactly what's going on. Right. But so tell us, what did your journey look like throughout that? When did you start switching to different, maybe heroic therapies or some, non-traditional things?
So, again, my mom, she was just my guardian angel. So, all right. So I've been, got the Lyme test, positive, came back. I think it was the summer of 2009. Go through all these doctors. It's pretty disappointing. It's pretty confusing. Told, you just might be past your prime at 19. If you can believe that, maybe you damaged your body with substances, and this is how it is. I mean, just a crushing time. Finally get in with Dr. Richard Falkenstein, and I'm on antibiotics, for almost a year at this point. So then from there, my mom has a friend, a really wonderful woman named Darren Winchester. She is, a local who's now no longer living in Virginia, but, she was friends with my mom. They go way, way back. She had something called a biofeedback machine. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with biofeedback machines. They're really cool, and this was pretty, this was 2009, 2010. Not a lot of people had these things, and so she was working on me. I was going to see her. I mean, I was just doing anything. If you told me to rub a crystal on my head and eat my shoe, I would do it, and so
I said the same thing on my podcast.
Yeah. And then she said, look, man, I think you need to go see this guy. And his name's Tim. And he, has this machine. It's a laser, and we can talk about, I'm happy to share. I don't know if there's show notes, but I would be more than happy to share some of these devices that were just really important for my healing. Go see him. He has this special laser. It's called a Mark V laser. These lasers are cold lasers. They're made from Dr. Jerry Graham and his wife, Candy Graham, in Colorado. I believe they are medical doctors. They're also intuitives, and they made these lasers, and I can send you guys information. And so I went to see this guy, Tim, and I didn't even realize he was an acupuncturist, and I was terrified of needles, but I wanted to go try this laser treatment because I noticed I was feeling better from the biofeedback work, just a little bit though. I mean, nothing too much, but a little. And, it turns out he had a whole, host of modalities. He had Pearl Rife machines. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Pearl Rife. This was very, very helpful for me. He had these lasers, did a variety of ionic foot baths. There's herbs, essential oils, and acupuncture. So I didn't realize what I was walking into. Had not thought about acupuncture for more than 5 minutes, or no, for more than 5 seconds of my life. So my first couple treatments was just a treatment with these lasers. And then, it came up, hey, I'm an acupuncturist. We can do these multiple modalities on you. I was terrified. I let him put one needle in my wrist, pericardium 6. That was it. And then my girlfriend at the time, who I had actually given Lyme to, but luckily we caught it and she recovered pretty quickly, said, oh, I'm down to get a treatment. And she did it. So I was like, okay, she can do it. Maybe I can do it, And so then I started getting acupuncture and laser therapy. And I'd be so obliterated after these treatments, I could barely drive home. I mean, it was moving tons of energy, having a massive effect, energetically and physiologically on me. And it was within a few sessions with this man, Tim, who's no longer in Virginia. If he was, I would totally put him, in the show notes or however you guys do it, where we could refer people. Unfortunately, he's moved and that practice is no longer there, but the information, the resources, and the machines he was using are out there, so we can help people find them if they want to try these lasers. And so really quickly, I started noticing like, oh man, this is doing something. And not only the effects of the treatment, the being in his presence, I felt like there were answers. He would take my pulse and he would say, oh dude, are you having anxiety and heart palpitations? And I was like, yes. And so he could take my pulse. The Chinese pulse system is not just speed and tempo, but it's a look into the body by detecting a variety of maybe 60 to 70 different qualities of the pulse. Is it floating? Is it deep? Is it tight like a guitar string? Is it very wide? So by taking the pulse, there's multiple positions you take it in on both wrists, you get a great snapshot of what's happening in the person's body. So he took my pulse and was able to tell me things about my body and have answers for me. And that was, honestly, I know it sounds crazy, that was the most important part, just to be in the presence of a practitioner that understood me, knew where I was at. It was such a relief to have him say, oh dude, you must be having you're sweating at night and this is happening and that's happening. I was like, yes, man. I mean, and so it was just within 2 or 3 sessions, I said, this guy, is the man, and whatever he says to do, I will follow him to the edge of the earth. Cause he was, really the only one that felt like I could offer me hope. And that sense that I got with him, his ability to diagnose and see me where I was at, combined with the just really awesome results I started getting really quickly, I just went all in. I was driving 2 hours every time to go from Richmond, Virginia up to Middleburg, Virginia. I was doing that every week while I was in college, while I was sick, but I would still make that trek every single week and just went weekly, sometimes twice a week, religiously for over a year.
Wow.
And once I started seeing him, I started getting some hope. Then I also got plugged into this group of healers that run a Waldorf school. It's called Hearthstone School. It's in Rappahannock County. It's actually where my mom works. And, I've known this one woman who runs the school named Jane. I had known her, almost my whole life, but I didn't realize what she was capable of. And so she was a very powerful healer and would do these healing sessions in the school. The school, Hearthstone, is a Waldorf school. It's a health food store and was a healing center before COVID. I think this slowed down a little bit, where a variety of healers from all across Virginia would come together and do these free healing sessions once a month there. So I started going to these healing sessions and seeing her, and it was really through my work with Tim and Jane. So I was getting acupuncture, Rife machine, Chinese herbs, laser therapy, essential oils, and then worked on by all these different healers at Jane's Center, as well as still being on a very stout dose of antibiotics, plus completely changing my lifestyle, eliminating all sorts of foods. I was allergic to all animal protein. So, I unfortunately wasn't able to eat any meat, any eggs, started to have a crazy reaction. But so I started eating organic, started going to bed at normal time, quit smoking cigarettes. It was the whole change where then I started to break through by year
Getting rid
three.
of toxins.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you still have that,
yep.
that meat issue, the allergy with the meat?
No, thankfully we did a whole protocol with these lasers, where it went away, and I was too scared to eat the meat. And then Tim, he said, dude, you can eat meat. And I didn't. And then he came down to Richmond, where I was living, and he said, have you eaten meat yet? And I said, no, man, I have not. And there's a health food store in Richmond called Elwood Thompson. I used to live there. They have kind of like a Whole Foods. They have a nice hot bar, and just it was such a scene there. So I would go there all the time. I had worked there at one point, so it was like, all right, let's go to Elwood Thompson's, and you're going to eat some meat. And I was terrified, but I was like, all right, man, I'm with you. So I'll do it. And I ate meat, and I had no reaction. And I noticed heat in my body. And the first couple of times I ate meat, I felt this surge of energy. And actually one time I ate meat and my dad called me, and I just yelled at my dad, and I was like, oh, sorry, man, I don't even know what's going on. I just ate a bunch of chicken, and now I'm feeling super amped. So I think I just been so nutrient depleted. Once I started eating meat, I mean, that was a hugely helpful turning point as well. So yeah, thankfully I was able to get past that. Yeah.
No, that's there's diet is so crucial, and that's something that people don't quite understand a lot of the time until they do the research and learn that that's a large part of getting better, not just taking, therapies to kill it and all that. So
that's right.
That's really interesting
process. Yeah.
But I like to think of my healing journey in stages and in percentages, and so you don't just magically get, like the common thing here is, you get sick overnight, you won't get better overnight. And so for me, it was like compounding gains, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I'd have improvements, and then I'd try something new, and I'd have worsening symptoms, and we'd have to tweak things. So throughout these years of healing, can you say, like, did you experience kind of like incremental gains? Like, what percentage would you say you were better by, and what therapies at what point were you starting to really notice that you were making those gains and you felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, all right, so just to start simply, I think the most impactful therapies for me, one, the tetracycline antibiotics, doxycycline in this case, but, I think those are very helpful. So that was big, because that kept me from going over the edge in the beginning. And then I think the second most transformative therapy was the Mark V laser. With that, I cleared, we worked on clearing Lyme disease, cleared the meat allergy, cleared herpes virus, cleared, a bunch of stuff that they say, hey, in Western medicine, this is a life sentence. And I was and then I actually ended up working in the clinic, kind of through this process. He took me on as an apprentice. So, we did a nod of the hat to the old school acupuncturists where the apprentice would live kind of on the grounds. I actually would stay up there with him a lot, and, get a guest house. And so, and so those are the modalities that were really helpful. And once I was with Tim a lot in the clinic, helping him out, getting treated, I was eating really healthy, that was when the real progress started to happen. So I think, doxycycline got me up to, 20%. Then the acupuncture and the laser treatments together, that was probably another, 30%. And then it was, just this slog of fighting for inches of just, lifestyle, refining and fine tuning everything. The use of herbs, the use of essential oils, the use of these rife machines. I think each one of these things got me a little bit more ground, and it was just a slow climb. And of course, there were times where I would backslide. That was usually due to my lifestyle choices. If I kind of fell off and stayed up super late, or, went out and was like, oh, I can't drink, but I'll smoke some cigarettes and then eat some shitty food. And it's like, whoa, that sets me back like a couple weeks. But yeah, so I think each one of those things gave me some ground. The biggest ones, though, I think were honestly the lasers. I mean, so
step back for a minute. With the
Sure.
laser treatment, you say
Yeah.
you did these, it was helping tremendously, and then
Yeah.
you would clear certain pathogens out. You
Yeah.
would notice that they were being removed and gone. So what were you, how did you know exactly, like what was it in, that you were able to diagnose and test that these were starting to clear up, aside from,
Yeah.
I'm sure you were feeling better and
Yeah. Well, of course you can always go and verify things with blood work. I really just relied on Tim to just say,
mm-hmm.
okay, we're ready to transition to this next stage of treatment. So, I knew how I felt, but I just trusted him completely to say, all right, we're going to switch to another protocol with the laser. Okay, now let's spend more time on the Rife machine. He really saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
I owe the man my life. He's a brother and a friend and a mentor now. And as soon as he gets his practice up and running, because I believe he's setting another one up, I'll send that information to you guys. I previously asked him if I could disclose his information, and he just said, on this podcast. And I said, hey, you might have some people reach out to you. And he said, I'm just not quite ready. He's setting things up right now. He's in a new location. Mm-hmm. So when he's ready, I'll email his information. So yeah, so I just really relied on him completely. Yeah, that's kind of the truth of the matter.
That's awesome. And one thing for me was, it's tough because a lot of people aren't financially, able to afford treatments. They aren't in a position where they can even work. They can't get disability insurance because it's just they're not believed in traditional settings, and you're gaslighted. Did you have any stress with finances, or was that racking up for you? And
I mean, I was. It was, again, my mother, my parents. So in 2008, there was a massive amount of foreclosures that occurred in the Appalachian Mountains, and so they lost their house. Their money was super tight. I was in college. I was 18, 19, had no money. Of course, my sister was younger than me. I was living off of student loans to get through school, working a little bit here and there. And my mom was out there busting her ass. I mean, pulling weeds with her friend's gardening company, cleaning bathrooms to then pay these practitioners in cash, because Dr. Fulkenstein is cash only. And I get it. As a practitioner now, we do not bill insurance. It's too much trouble. They'll reject your claims. And so, my mom rallied and somehow managed to keep our family afloat, which I think my parents, at one point, it was very difficult for them, losing the house, and things were, it was really touch and go, and then still somehow pulled together the cold hard cash to send me to all these healers weekly. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. And so now as an adult, with a successful business, that has not gone unforgotten. And, I'm there for my parents, hopefully in the way that they were to be there for me. But at that time, dude, it was hard. And of course, also Tim, and, Tim's a great example of this. I mean, he let me run a tab. I think at one point I probably had a $5,000 tab with him, which I then paid off. I can't remember. I know my dad ended up with seeing him, had like a $2,000 tab. I paid that off as well, but I don't know if mine was totally 5,000, but it was a lot. So, it was just like hustle, fight, try to figure this out. And finances is very difficult. And so, again, it's just the divine guiding hand, where it's like, here's the edge, you are teetering on it, and you could go over it, but I somehow did not. Thankfully, nothing by my own work, the people around me, my mother, these healers, to guide me through that. Yeah.
That's incredible. And that's why, I really preach to people, get out there and network with those in this, that have lived through this, because you are going to blow through your money fast if you don't know what you're going into and what you're doing. And if you don't have that, if you don't have data to back up what you're planning for,
Totally.
I mean, and the financial stress alone will keep you sick. And
I mean,
I love that
financial ruin comes with chronic disease. And look, I'm a proud patriot. I love America. I've traveled all over the world. I've had deep relationships with people that are in foreign countries. So I know how lucky we are to be here. You can also have an honest look and recognize that, it's a land of opportunity. You can come out here and crush it. You just go forward with a good idea and make a lot of money. You can also fall off the cliff. There's not the safety net that there are in, some other places. Of course, some places have zero safety net. So we have some level of safety net, but I mean, if you have something like, this is a common story with Lyme, is that, you know, financial ruin is it usually goes along with it. And that's just the super hard, sad truth. And I see this in my clinic. I've got patients I just treat pro bono because, you know, I know where they're at. They're against very difficult odds. They have, you know, issues like Lyme. I mean, Lyme is not the only issue. As you guys know, there's so many of these type of diseases that are out there where you just, they just say, well, sorry, we don't know, we can't help you. And people, their finances suffer terribly, and you need money to seek these treatments. So it's a very difficult knot to try to navigate.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, resources like Take Boot Camp, man, if people can get on here and just give it, you know, maybe a couple hours a week and listen to these things, you're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Knowledge
just
is
because
power.
you'll have a lot more insight going into it, and you can go into these appointments with your doctors informed, and you know, you can speak the lingo to them. I've had primary care doctors who I tell them what I know, and they were just blown away. And I've taught them things about it that they weren't even aware of. So,
yeah, I mean, they'd have to do a whole PhD in Lyme, and so, you know, and this is the case with so many of these type of diseases where the broad overview. I mean, I've been through a medical program, went to Virginia University of Integrative Medicine, and you know, you could spend 4 years just on Lyme. You know, so we need people like you, and thank God, and credit to those doctors for being humble and honest and saying, okay, you know, let me humble myself and have my mind be open and learn from this guy who's not a doctor.
I had a neurologist. Yeah, I agree. And I had a neurologist that I talk about in my podcast episode who I saw because I was having MS-like symptoms, and so I did all the neurology tests. And this was a younger guy who was a neurologist in Fargo, North Dakota, where I was living. And he was not that familiar with like, you know, how Lyme might affect and stuff like that. But he was open-minded enough to say, you know, hey, your tests are all basically normal, but something's obviously wrong here, and you're not just making it up. And so he did refer me to Johns Hopkins Lyme Disease Treatment Center. However, because my tests were not conclusive enough, Johns Hopkins wasn't able to really actually take me in, even though they were like, yeah, your symptoms, like from a clinical standpoint, really, really speak Lyme. But they said, you know, go see your local LLMDs and people like that, because they're going to have just as much knowledge probably as what we will. And I couldn't believe that. Like, where do I go now?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, yeah, and the Lyme layer MDs, you know, they're going to treat you on symptoms. Yeah, you know, that's just where it is. So, yeah, that I was slated to go to Johns Hopkins, but I met Tim, and so I didn't make it to my Johns Hopkins appointments. I still have an account with them.
Wow.
But yeah, you know, that's boy. And look, the CDC, the FDA, these governing organizations that kind of are guiding hands for the broader Western medical community, they're 25 years behind. And so it takes time to catch up. So, you know, we are learning and getting there as an overall medical community, but it takes time, you know, and so a lot of people fall through the cracks in that time.
Yeah. Well, a couple questions I think the audience might like to hear, because I see it on your summary that you gave to us prior, and I think people would want to know, you know, what were your worst symptoms, and like what was your, you know, how bad did it get? What was the worst thing you endured? And then I'm really curious. I think people will want to know about your treatments with IV ozone and the shamanic healing that you did, which you say was one of the most powerful experiences in your life, and then the temperature stress therapy. I'd love to tell people about that a little bit.
That's great. We can talk about all that. Do you want to start with worst moments? Would that be a
worst symptom that you had? I'm curious myself. So,
oh, dude, you know, it was probably not the most painful symptom, but the most mentally painful. You know, I think, you know, I can take a lot of beating, but I think the mental stress I was so worried about my family members, my loved ones, my mother, my sister, my dad, my girlfriend, my cat, you know, all the people I loved so much at that time. You know, that was my closest circle. I was so stressed about if they would be okay when I passed away. And, you know, that caused me significant pain. And yeah, there were some hard times, man. I mean, I remember getting out of bed with my girlfriend and going and getting in bed with my mom and saying, you know, I think this is it. because laying there at night and just thinking, man, we're out in the, we're 40 minutes from the hospital. So tired. We've been down this road, been to so many appointments, so much. I wore the permanent EKG on my chest for like 6 weeks. I was just exhausted by the process by the time I got to these really hard times, which was probably about a year and a half in, something like that. And so, looking back, it's like, oh, why didn't you just jump in the car or call 911? But really what I did, I just wanted to lay down with my mom and hold her hand. And she did me a great service when she said, if you need to go, it's okay. We'll be okay. And so, working through, I remember that one night specifically, once she said it to me, I just immediately fell asleep because, I would be afraid to sleep. I'd feel this arrhythmia and this failure to beat of the heart, and then this kind of fuzziness, and then the beat would come back, and then would kind of come back a little bit. But I was thinking, man, I'm really close to the edge here. Something is not right. So when she told me that, it would just give me such great relief and fall asleep. So the lowest moments, the most painful moments were nights like that, where I was, whether I was truly there physically or not, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, I was looking, to the other side thinking, okay, this is it. And I wasn't worried about my own, physical discomfort or suffering or fear of death, really, not at that time. I was so worried about my loved ones. So yeah, that was for sure the hardest part.
Man, that gets me a little choked up emotional, because that's, people look at, us guys when we're young and like, we're invincible and we don't tell people we're hurting. And for me, it was like the mental and emotional pain that I experienced was worse than any physical pain that I went through. And
oh yeah,
there was definitely moments where I questioned if I could make it through as well. And I'm, just want to let anybody know who's listening, like, I know it seems like it's never going to end, but it will get better. It will. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And that's, I hope that helps a lot of people to hear from,
sure.
young, strong, couple lads like ourselves who, most people would never guess that we were going through that inside. Right. So, so appreciate you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, of course. And, absolutely. I hope that, sharing that, I know there's people out there that can relate that are probably going through something like that right now. So, I say a prayer in my heart for them and, stand beside them. And yes, what you say is you will get through it. But by the time you get through it, you won't be the same person that you were. So, I kept thinking, I can't wait to get through this and just bust through this and come out the other side. But, by the time that happened, I was completely transformed by the refiner's fire. I mean, I just been burned away in totality. And what was left was, I think, my true self. I know it sounds kind of cliche to say, but by the time you get through a fire like that, you are unrecognizable. You don't think the same way. So you can't even possibly imagine what it's going to be like, because you'll be so transformed and changed in the best way possible by the process. It's just mind blowing to me. So yeah, all the plans I was making and being so excited to get back to how life was, there is no going back. When you go through this dark night of the soul, as I like to call it, as I think a lot of people would refer to it, and some people would go through multiple chapters of dark nights of the soul. It's a total transformation. So I think I would say don't even focus too much on what will be. Just have trust that you're walking through what you're meant to. And I know it's so hard to hear when you're in the fire, and I'm careful to say that to my patients when they go through something horrible. But just as someone who's personally been way down the valley, I feel like I can say that with a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. When you're in it, you don't realize, but later on in life, you're going to look back and go, wow, I've grown so much. And the thing that I noticed, is that now the little things that used to bug me, the things that I would get, upset about, the things that people in general in this society get worked up about, you know, it's just the small stuff. I don't sweat that stuff anymore. And
Totally.
so you know, when I recovered, man, I felt like every day was a party. I was like, I'm so grateful and glad just to be able to like be healthy
And
and
you
walk
got to
and
hang on to
be out.
that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the
And,
gratitude, right?
it'll fade, at least for me, I remember making so many deals with the universe and God and whatever you
Yep.
want to call it, and being like, if I could just be normal, I'll never blank. And then, before you know, it's like, if I could just get that car, or if I could just date that person, or, whatever it is. And then I think I would catch myself and say,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, like, don't forget the lessons. And, the further away from the experience I got, the easier it would be to forget. It's almost like with the trauma of the experience, you want to just block it out. But I would say, yeah, don't block it out. Take the good, from that. And and that's a regular reminder weekly. I think about this, where I think, because life, the crush of adult life, if you're running small business, you got children, you got mortgage, you got this stuff. I mean, but we cannot forget the lessons of Lyme, and when you do come through that, I'd say to the listeners, when you come through it, man, carry that with you. It's just everyday gratitude. And, what a incredible, kind of perspective and reset. I'm of the belief that when you walk through the mud, it actually is spiritually, it's like Navy SEAL training for you spiritually. It's good for you, because then it helps your perspective. And there's tons of people out there that are in a healthy body, they got tons of money. I know them personally, never walked through any chronic disease, and they're not happy. So what a perspective that is, right?
Well, yeah, and one of the guys that I looked up to, Dr. Rawls, he said something that really resonated with me. He said that we will all have a mountain to climb in our life, and for him, it was the mountain of getting better from Lyme disease and healing from that and learning about it. And that was his mountain at the time. That was my mountain. And so everyone's mountain is going to be different and unique, whether it's Lyme or anything else in life, cancer, death of a loved one, whatever tragedy or perceived tragedy that it feels like you're going through at the time. There's always a balance to things. And like you were talking about acupuncture, the yin and yang. And I think that, life finds a way of balancing itself out somehow. And, you almost have to go through that to get through it. Right. So,
Yeah. And you have
super
to
inspired,
trust that.
man.
You got to
Yeah.
trust that. It's hard when you're in the fight to remember that and trust that. Yeah, I remember going through a really bad breakup where I was just so heartbroken, like couldn't eat, was dropping weight. People were like, "Hey, are you okay? You look really messed up." And the girl had sent me this TED talk, and I'm blanking on what it was, but I'll send it to you guys. And it was so powerful, where the whole premise of the TED talk was, a lot of people walk through life, and you get pounded when you go through life. Hard stuff is happening, happens to all of us. Some people, out of self-protection, shut themselves down a little bit, but by doing that, they accidentally and inadvertently also close themselves off to the good. And the whole premise of the TED talk is that it takes tremendous courage to keep yourself open, allow yourself to feel and fully experience the utter shit, the other difficulty, because then you'll also be open to all the magic and beauty and light that life really is. So when we're way down in the valley, it's easy to just say, wow, I can't take this, and we just close off. But the whole premise of TED Talk was saying, even when you're suffering deeply, be practice and work on being courageous, keeping your heart open, keeping yourself open to all that is life, because there's also all this magic, beauty, joy, light is there available to all of us. And that resonates to me, whether it's heartbreak, chronic disease. And I think Chinese medicine would agree, is that, they would agree and say, you want to allow yourself to experience stuff fully, and then you can actually move through it. So.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so I know we haven't touched on it yet, but let's go over the shamanic healing.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, for sure, man.
The ozone and the temperature stress therapy that you did.
Yeah. Well, I think another modality I forgot to even say, dude, I should honestly have written this down, and so maybe we could make a list of all the modalities that were helpful. But weight training really helped me towards the end. I mean, that I feel like that got me the final 10-15% there was weight training, like vigorous working out. But yeah, temperature stress training I find to just be super helpful. I'm a big fan of cold plunging. It's very popular right now. You got on Instagram, all the influencers are all jumping in ice baths and stuff. I particularly think that heat stress training, but you have to ease in with all this stuff. So whether it be sauna, I'm a big fan of traditional sauna. I think there's incredible data that shows what it does, for your recovery, your heat shock proteins, your white blood cells, brain chemicals that often, you have a hard time when you have Lyme, if there's depression. So, there's too many. We could do a whole podcast on just any one of these therapies, whether it's weightlifting, cold,
I agree.
But yeah, so, I find my body personally responds really, really well. If I can weight train, 3 or 4 days a week, and then do some cold temperature exposure in the morning, and then do some 3 or 4 days a week, and then do some sauna after I weight train. I mean, that's the perfect schedule. The last 8 years, I've been utterly obsessed with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I spend all my free time on the mat trying to, not get choked by my friends. But if I was going to train for health, I would do weight training and then temperature stress training. And so I found like I felt those were very helpful, specifically the weight training. And then the shamanic healing, and so I guess I could lump that in with, working with Jane at Hearthstone, shamanic healing. This is more like working on the spirit, the emotions. And like we're talking about when we're working with Lyme, you want to clean up your diet. You want to get your sleep right. You want to do, I guess tetracycline antibiotics is a good idea for a lot of people, I think. Whether it be for me, it was other modalities, acupuncture and lasers, were really huge. Rife machines were helpful. Herbs were very helpful. But I think it's also really important to address emotions. So whether that be some kind of ceremonial stuff like sweat lodges, counseling, just traditional counseling. For me, it was this kind of shamanic healing, whether it be an ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know when I had Lyme, if I could have gone. I have a friend that runs an ayahuasca retreat, or did at one point. I don't know if I could have physically done it. But I know some people that are sick will do that. But I think that's one area that gets very neglected, is that, we've got this whole list of stuff. Like, I'm going to eat clean. I'm going to get my acupuncture. I'm going to go get my laser sessions, take my antibiotics, take my herbs. But we need to address the spirit. And so that was another very important part for me, was addressing the spirit and what I would call trapped emotions in the body, that go back to childhood, being really sensitive kid. I think what drove me towards reckless and wild behavior, living in the party zone, because I was kind of, staying more up here, not dropping in, because I didn't want to feel what was uncomfortable. But then, Lyme, you get so confronted, or anything like Lyme, if you're really going to heal, you get so confronted with all the stuff you're running from, because you got to address that too. So that was where the shamanic healing really helped me. And this was with a group of probably 8 healers that were around Virginia. They came. It was actually at Hearthstone School at the Healing Center, and it was one of the healing sessions where nobody showed up except for me. So then all the healers worked on me for about 4 hours. It was the craziest experience of my life. I couldn't move my body at times. It was completely paralyzed. There was, it was just super epic. So, I think, that was, kind of the intro to spiritual healing for me. I think whether it's through your church, working with your Bible study group. I think if you're interested in pursuing indigenous spiritual healing, whether it be, I'm extremely fortunate to have a friend who's a Native American out here in Idaho that does sweat lodges. Whether it be going down to the indigenous folks that down Central and South America that do the ayahuasca, whether it be a prayer group. I think there's so many ways to access it. So it doesn't have to be shamanic healing. It doesn't have to be any one of these things, but I think it's a absolute necessity in true deep healing, is to address the spirit and the emotions. Yeah,
man, I'm just blown away, because I have done so many hours, hundreds of hours of research. I thought I've known everything that people try and have done. I know what ayahuasca is. I know that, how that can help, and people have done that in this. But man, there's always something about when you talk to other people, there's things that I learned that I'd never even heard before. And so that's so cool to hear you talk about some of these experiences with something. I want to go look up these things right now. I'm sure people are sitting on their phones looking all this up, right? They're about to look it up or writing it down and seeing if there's anyone local near them. And how does someone go about finding someone like that?
Oh my God,
I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah,
there's
it's
no phone books for them, right?
Yeah, it's not like you just look these people up on Google. That's and that's why it's so important. We say there's many paths to healing, and so but I think, yeah, just to address the spirit and the emotions. And so, gosh, there's a variety of therapies. I'd recommend starting maybe Gestalt therapy, tapping, breath work. Oh, there's an amazing group here in Boise called Exhale Boise, where they do somatic breath work. And this is a way to get emotions out of your body. You'd be amazed at some of these guys' events. I mean, these big, strong, tatted up dudes are just bawling, and they're not expecting that to happen. But they do these breathing exercises, and then all this stuff comes out. So there's more than one way to start to clean out to let go of some of what we're all holding. We all go through life as sensitive beings at one point. When you're a kid, for sure, you're open, you take on, stuff. And so it's good to clean out the tank, I think. And so, yeah, I would start, probably the simplest ways to do it would be maybe some sort of Gestalt therapy or therapy, see if there's some somatic breath work around. If you have connections in a more indigenous community, look into some kind of sweat lodge. If you're really brave and you want to go down and do an ayahuasca ceremony, make sure you're with really good people. Right. And if you're super fortunate like I was, which was by nothing other than dumb luck to just have these people put in my path, you can explore some kind of shamanic healing. And it just I would say, maybe if you Google it, and if someone pops up with a real flashy website, it's like, oh yeah, shamanic healing, $1,000 an hour, be careful. There are hustlers out there, this was free, and so there's a lot of incredible light workers out there that are just working on and helping people for the right reasons. And then there's folks that are doing it out of a business. Of course, my business is acupuncture business. We have to make money. It's an energetic exchange. So it's normal to pay or bring something, in trade if you go to a sweat lodge, or pay your acupuncturist or pay your therapist. But there's also, I think, predatory groups out there that will, charge exorbitant amounts of money, claim to have some answers. So, I do encourage you to do your research and don't just buy the first thing you see. But this is probably the most difficult section if we were to break it down sections like diet, acupuncture, herbs, ozone, exercise. The spiritual healing is probably the most challenging one to really find, because it's not going to be the same as it would be for me, for you, if that makes sense.
Oh, I totally agree on that. And I think for speaking from a men's mental health standpoint, I'm a huge advocate for men speaking out and telling about their struggles. I think we've really done a poor job as a society of allowing men to express their emotions. And I've personally lost friends to suicide, who, I didn't see coming. I had a short stint in the Air Force. And so actually one of the things that shocked me is seeing all these young bucks running around in basic training, and being so, fragile, that I've never seen so many grown men crying before. Like I don't even think before basic training I had really even seen a guy crying in my life, before I was 18. So it's incredible what men can bottle up inside, and it's unfortunate that there's not enough awareness around it, because I think that the world would be a little bit more peaceful, and we could heal collectively if that stigma weren't out there so much. And so that's why it's hard to talk about it myself, and I'm sure it's been difficult for you in certain situations. But just to any of the fellows out there, people, we go through it. We all go through it. Some of us buried in better than others, but don't bury in. That's what
absolutely.
People.
That is so awesome. It's so important. And I think, if you read writers like Yuval Harari, wrote *Sapiens*, or different evolutionary biologists, what we have going on, a great book that I really love is called *Tribe* by Sebastian Junger. There's these different themes across these really intelligent people that put these books together that talk about trauma. If we look at where we evolved from, we were in tribal societies, groups of 20 to 50 people, I think is roughly the idea, maybe a little bit more. And trauma was shared collectively with the group. I mean, it was probably pretty traumatic. The human being has incredible capacity to deal with trauma. Think about it. You're out in the woods, it's cold, there's no food, you're fighting other dudes with hatchets. I mean, you're getting down. But then you come back to the tribe and everyone grieves together. And so now we're in this society where, there is no reintegration process. You go through life, you take your licks, some thank you for your service, man. That's super awesome. Guys like you go and serve, they see horrific shit and they just have to reintegrate back into society. I think is it Hurt Locker? There's a great scene in Hurt Locker where it's like the dude's in the grocery store just like, what the fuck, after being in the desert, fighting, and now he's back. And so there's no so we need to really reintegrate in a way that allows you to process what you've been through. And I think this is not just vets, it's first responders, or just anybody that makes it on the street, because life is crazy, and so that is something that our society is really missing, that I think previous groups that were doing really hardcore shit would then come back and grieve together and heal together, rather than just jumping right back into like, all right, I'm the man, I gotta pay the mortgage, so I keep going. And then we just get this compounded trauma. And this is not just men, this is women too. It's just like, oh, something horrible happened, but just it's a busy, fast-paced consumer lifestyle we're all in. We got to get up and go every day. And there's not that time and space and the attention given to unpacking that. And Chinese medicine is very clear. That will make you sick. Unprocessed emotions will make you sick. And it's a two-way street. Devastating sickness like Lyme is an opportunity to, unpack it. It's a call to do so. And, depending on your spiritual beliefs, I mean, it's an opportunity and a call, and maybe a forced, in some ways, time of really cleaning yourself up. It's you can look at it that way, I think.
Yeah. So, and I work in social media marketing, digital marketing, and so I understand the psychology behind the algorithms of these platforms and how they operate, how they suck you in. And so right now we're really experiencing an epidemic of loneliness throughout our culture.
For
and
sure.
That is loneliness will kill you faster than almost any other vice that you could ever have if you're not lonely. It is, from what I've heard, you're actually it's better for your health to go out with the boys and have a couple beers at a sports bar
totally
once or twice a week than it is to shut yourself in and not do any alcohol, because it's so crucial.
We are tribal creatures.
And so, man, we were meant to be on this call together. This is awesome.
And we saw that during the pandemic, with the effects of the lockdowns, and how devastating that was for so many people, and how devastating that is for your immune system to shelter. But not to go off on a wild tangent, but so that's right. I think I tell this to my patients all the time: have fun. You gotta, don't worry if you have some wine. You're walking a straight and narrow path. Once you can, if your body won't just absolutely freak out. Of course, we have to, recognize where you are. There's a time and a place for walking a very narrow path, and but then once you get a little wiggle room, I don't think there's anything wrong with you going out, but you hold it in balance. And that's what healing Lyme is really about. Is about finding balance in your life. And I'm just and so I didn't know if you had other modalities you want to talk about. I feel like we've talked about so many modalities. I think it might be helpful. I was just feeling called to, if you guys want, and you're running the podcast, so just tell me if this sounds like a good idea, just to kind of lay out all the modalities in a hierarchy for me of order of most important, maybe where to start, because I think a lot of people, when you have Lyme, it's like, I don't know where the fuck to start. Like, what do we even do? So maybe we could give some recommendations about, at least, for me, what was helpful and what those modalities are. Would that be good?
What do you think, Rich? Take it away. All right, take it away. Let's hear like kind of your. It's good to have structure, right? It's good to have a process, stages, like have a plan, be strategic. Totally. So let's hear that.
Okay, well, let's start with the easiest, and let's make it a conversation. I want to, you guys you've walked the same path, but I think first step is diet. This is you can do that right away. First step is diet. So get caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, what goes in your body, drugs. You got to get clean. You got to, eat clean. So organic, folic acid, pesticides, GMO foods, and so we could do a whole podcast just on this, but, just in a nutshell, do a whole foods diet. Does it come from an animal or a plant? That's it. So, meat, fruit, nuts, veggies, organic, all organic. And then for grains, I'm not a fan of gluten when you have Lyme. I think, white rice, organic white rice, you could do some oats if you want, if you're not worried about phytic acid. Some of my teachers would totally die if I said eat oats because there are nutrient blocking phyto acids. So I think the perfect carbs is really white rice and fruit, and that's it. But if you want to eat oats,
I did organic oats.
organic
Oats,
oats,
organic gluten-free oats. I believe they
sure,
have
that's
that.
yep, that's good. And then the whole spectrum of fruits, vegetables, meats, healthy fats, and then if you're going to do dairy, I think you need to do raw dairy. Processed dairy, you've lost all the enzymes, so it's a totally different thing. But not, if you want to do some raw dairy, I think that's great. I personally am a believer that saturated fats are not bad. And we actually know there's data out of Berkeley and Stanford that dietary cholesterol is not what's jacking up your cholesterol. It's actually sugar destroying your gut biome, which is causing leaky gut, which is then causing endotoxins that are okay to be in your intestines, but not okay to be in your bloodstream to dock on the LDL docking site. So, people are like, oh, can I eat butter? I think that's way better than vegetable oil. Seed oils, get them out. Canola oil, peanut oil, all that stuff, totally inflammatory. So really, rather than focusing on like what you can't have, it's a lot more simple if you just say what you can have. Everything organic, all fruits, all veggies, all meats, all animal products, as raw as possible, as unprocessed as possible, and then organic, clean grains like white rice, gluten-free oats, and then just cut everything else out. And it sounds crazy, but once I started eating that way, it was great. I loved it. I look forward to it. You spice your food up all nice, and then you feel so much better. So that's one, is diet. I think your water source is super important, so to have a good source of water, whether it's remineralized, reverse osmosis water, spring water, just do the best you can, I think, with that. Obviously some of those filtration systems are super expensive, but you don't probably want to be drinking tap water because you're getting antidepressants, birth control, antibiotics, so all of these things, if it's like a scale, is one little weight on the scale. So we clean up the diet, less toxins from the water. That's good. Then I would say get your sleep. Sleep is super essential. You have to go to sleep on time. So prioritize sleep. No screens, no blue light in your eyes. Make your room super dark, make it cold. Absolutely prioritize your sleep. So if you get clean water, a good diet, and enough sleep, and then you add in a gentle, super gentle exercise routine, all this is basically free. You can do it. You don't have to consult anybody to do it. Try to exercise 3 days a week, a little bit of cardio and a little bit of resistance, specifically the resistance.
Can I stop you and back up one moment there? And go back to the sleep.
Yeah.
Because I believe that sleep is absolutely one of the most crucial points of healing, and not just healing, but also surviving and living a good life and feeling good.
Essential, man. Essential.
What did you do any, is there any, so I had bad insomnia as part of my symptoms right away. I had a lot of psychological issues with that. I was, I had to cave and take some prescription drugs for a while just to be able to get that sleep. I mean, I didn't want to be on them. Melatonin helped me. Is there anything that you recommend as far as sleep? I know that's a big issue for a lot of people
as well. Yeah, I was taking melatonin. I think it's all relative. And so, melatonin is a hormone. Do we want to take exogenous hormones long term? Probably not. But I would say go to an herbalist, get some herbs. Herbs is the best recommendation because that, herbs are very low consequence, very user friendly. If you can't find a good herbalist, and I think most people in most places should know a good herbalist. There's tons out there. They could be an acupuncturist or just an herbalist standalone, but usually acupuncturists are also herbalists together. So you could start with looking for acupuncturists and then just Google, is there an herbalist around me? So I think that's the best place to start. But dude, it's do what you got to do. I mean, if you got to take melatonin or Ambien or whatever, if you don't sleep, and it's super normal for your sleep to be very interrupted when you have a pathogen like Lyme. It's so hard to heal. So that's just it's just relative
almost
to
impossible.
How bad. Yep. And you just do what you got to do. And so, start with herbs, and then go up from there, whether it be exogenous hormones, maybe there's some peptides. If the FDA doesn't make those illegal tomorrow, I'd recommend starting with that. And then, you've got obviously your pharmaceutical prescription sleep aids like Ambien, something like that. So,
let me rejoin and just before we leave this one space, right? And I want to revisit Dr. Bill Rawls, right? You guys have mentioned him a couple of times today, and one of the things Dr. Rawls has argued both on this podcast, he's been on this podcast I think 4 times, and in his books, is that Lyme disease is essentially the pot boiling over, right? You're becoming toxic and the pot is boiling over. One of the themes that you two seem to be developing here is that, you know, there are many things that we do to contribute to this pot boiling over. And we find ourselves in a position where the pot has boiled over. One of the first things we have to do is we have to identify what are the things that we're doing that are causing the, you know, this toxic pot, or what are we adding to it? And we can now go back and get to the basics, right? One of the basics that you two have just developed is our diet, right? And what is it that we're eating, and how is that contributing to our toxic pot? Another thing you were talking about is the fluids that we're intaking, and how is that adding to the toxic pot? And then you started to talk about sleep, and sleep is important on a number of different levels. But of course, we understand that the only way that our brain detoxes is when we're sleeping. And then, of course, movement is important for detoxification as well. So I'd like both of you to sort of react to what I was observing about this conversation, where we have this pot that's boiled over, and how we can now begin to first take pieces out of this pot that we're contributing, and then ultimately help our body to detox by making sure that we're sleeping and making sure that we're getting movement.
And that's exactly right. I couldn't agree with that more. And that's your foundation, you know, what you eat, what you drink, do you sleep, do you move, and hopefully sweat a little bit when you move. And I know when people are really sick, you know, it might just be 5 minutes, but just starting. And that for me was so helpful. So that's your foundation. And to be honest, if you are doing those things, you're ahead of 90% of the US population. And, you know, this is a lifelong change, and it's hard. And so you don't want to just yank the rug all at once. You know, I like to take, you know, each week we just focus on one thing. Okay, this week we're going to try and clean up the food. Next week, let's look into water filters. Week after that, let's try and work on the sleep. You don't want to get overwhelmed. We want this to be an organic shift. But yeah, that's so right. Is, you know, not put anything else in your pot. You're not standing in your own way. If you can, you know, detox a little bit and not add to the problems, your body is a lot more likely to be able to rebalance itself. So just really not screwing ourselves over is such an important part of life, right? Yeah, and so that's your foundation.
What I find fascinating is that the body will tell you, like your skin and the way you sweat and the way you smell will tell you your health. So if your skin isn't clear, if you've got, you know, a lot of blemishes and things like that, and when you sweat, there's just a really, like, I understand we all get smelly at times, but there's times where when you sweat, you stink worse than other times. Those times when you stink really bad, that's because your body's expelling things that it cannot process. And so it's coming out through your pores. And so the skin is so important with the healing too. It's just, for me, it was Epsom salt baths were a godsend. In fact, I'm going to do one after this. I have Dr. Teal's Epsom salt. It's got melatonin in it with lavender, and it's so relaxing. I know that sounds, you know, I think, you know, a lot of guys are like, oh, you just take baths with Epsom salt. Well, yeah, it feels great. I don't have a hot tub, and that Epsom salt soaks in, gets magnesium into your body, and we're so deficient on magnesium in society, and so you can't get enough of it, it seems like. So absolutely, of course, detoxing was number one thing for me to purge out and feel better. I would feel so much better almost immediately after doing some of these detox strategies. Lemon water, sweating, infrared sauna, those were crucial for me. So
yeah, and I think that's the next tier that we could go to. And, you know, you've got your foundation diet, you know, food, water, sleep, and then some exercise. And then we can start, you know, once you have that solid, start bringing in these modalities like you might have mentioned, red light therapy, or, you know, sauna, all these different things, and start working on the detoxing. But if you're pouring in a bunch of poison, you better stop that first before you go and detox. And yeah, just a note on the Epsom salts with lavender manly thing. You know, I think to be a man that takes Epsom salts bath with lavender and cries, you know, we can actually cry in the bath. I would invite any man that thinks that we're with me to
my therapy
come,
session.
Yeah, come meet us on the jiu-jitsu mat so we can find out, you know, how what they had to say after that. You know, I think you can own that, you know, and yeah, and so that's great, and I encourage, you know, all that. And yeah, so
I like the candles, man. It's a good time. I enjoy it. Like, it's my little getaway time,
dude. Good.
Yeah. The world's chaotic around me. It's my one little escape where I can just lay there for a while, just not have to think about anything going on around me. I kind of meditate a little bit, and so it's been oh my God, I can't even. My wife, she's the same way. She takes a bath almost every night, and so we're both kind of in sync with that type of system.
Yep. Oh, that's awesome. So just for me personally, and so not to talk about all the modalities that are super fun we could talk about, but just for me it was clean up diet, get good water, get some sleep, get a little bit of exercise. Then from there, the tetracycline antibiotics extremely helpful. So I would say don't be afraid of antibiotics. I mean, they could save your life. I feel like they saved mine at one point. I think and it was antibiotics, acupuncture. There's something that most people can have access to. These Mark V lasers, which we'll put some descriptions down in the show notes that they could find hopefully a practitioner with those lasers. Rife machines, specifically the Pearl Rife machine, and then working on the emotions. For me it was this shamanic healing, but whether it be breath work or whatever else. And then you can add in for me it's cold and hot therapy. I think that would be in the same category of red light, all these detoxification therapies as well. So that's pretty much if I'm not forgetting anything, that's pretty much the whole gamut of modalities that I used that helped to bring me back. And each one was extremely important.
So let's talk a little bit more about the emotional and the spiritual healing, because you and I are now about to, Jacob, take the step to talk about your transformation and your spiritual transformation, right?
Okay.
But talk to us a little bit more about how you didn't just focus on your body, which you've sort of given us with this detox element, but talk to us a little bit more about the emotional and the spiritual. And I want you to talk about the connection between the two, right? Because you and I started to touch upon, the energetic nature of who we are, right? We talked about how your now profession, your training was something that caused you not to just use allopathic and medical terms to describe what's happening, but also the chi and and the spirit. But so help me out with this. Talk to us about the vibrational nature of who we are. Talk to us about how our neural pathways and our neural networks are built based on our past experiences, and how we have to deal with retraining our brain so that we can both emit and receive healthy vibration, so that we can heal.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's awesome. You're really setting me up. That's a nice tee off to just I think you've within that statement, there's so much truth there, and I'll just build on it a little bit. I think Einstein says it very clearly: energy cannot be created or destroyed; it just transfers. I think if we look at, it's about 28 days. If you do something 28 days in a row, you actually create a neural pathway. And so if we go through a super traumatic experience that goes on for a month, we're in this mode of operation. And there's these great studies. I think it's Dr. Emoto's Japanese guy did these studies where they wrote down on a piece of paper in Japan different words, and then they had this special freezer and they would flash freeze it. Have you heard of this study?
I haven't.
And they would look at the patterns. So words like pain, anger, torture, these sort of things were these gnarly Swiss cheese patterns. And then words like forgiveness, redemption, love, light, healing were these beautiful snowflake patterns. And so the point of the study was to capture, see if we could capture the charge, the energetic vibration of words. So, imagine you go through a traumatic experience that lasts for a year, for example, like someone who goes through chronic Lyme. And so we've got this strong neural groove, this mode of operation of like, I'm sick, this is shitty, whatever it may be. We're carrying that, you're holding that, you're holding that vibration. We're 79% water. So that is having a physiological effect. So that, those emotions are rippling out into your physical body. And then we can also look at, trauma of the past, which we all go through. I mean, I don't know anybody that's walked through life. I mean, some of my spiritual teachers would say we come here, to get beat up on purpose, as part of the learning experience. But then, it's important that we clear, that we don't just hold all that trauma, because then, the energetics, literally the energetics, the vibration, of your of you is going to show up in your body. And, that's kind of like the expression of a physical symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper energetic imbalance. So I think going back, clearing trauma, creating new neural pathways, changing the story that we tell ourselves, like, I'm sick, I'm weak, I'm fucked, I'm going to die, whatever it may be. These were all things that were in my mind, to I am strong. I have trust. I trust my body. I'm going to get through this. Combined with actual, like, real deal, legit, whether it be breath work or shamanic healing, that can actually really dump this stuff out of you, and it can be kind of jarring when it happens. A lot of people don't realize what they're holding. Is very transformative. For you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's all connected. The energetics, the vibration connects it all, if that makes sense. Hopefully that's articulated in a way that our viewers can digest. That's just how I see it.
Yeah. So let's build out a little bit more. You talked about this physical foundation that you're building, where
Yep.
you're not adding to your toxic bucket. You talked about how you have to take steps to learn how to physically detox. But I want you to talk to us more about now, how do you emotionally and spiritually detox, and how that took you to your career path, where you began to now study what you've now begun to study. Bring us to that, how
Sure.
that second and third level of understanding of the impact that the trauma has had on you brought you to where you are today, where you're now helping people to understand that it's not enough to physically heal. You must emotionally and spiritually heal if you're going to get through this journey.
Absolutely. And it's an ongoing process, and really we just have to understand, Lyme is just a one of the things that needs to be healed. It's not like I need to heal my emotional trauma so I can heal my Lyme. It's more like the Lyme is providing this opportunity to go back and clear whatever I was holding that brought the Lyme in, and also clear all the other shit too, all the way back. And it's an ongoing process. I don't think you actually it's not like you just get there. If ever, unless you hit enlightenment, just go off. But
No,
yeah,
but let's talk about that a little bit, Jacob, because
sure.
you're right. Isn't it really the neurological pathways which are defining your emotional and spiritual relationships that actually make you vulnerable to the disease?
Oh,
And
totally.
as a result of that vulnerability, that's why you become chronically ill. So you are, in fact, going to have to focus on these, your neurology, if you're going to ultimately be successful in healing the Lyme. But that is, again, the opportunity to now go back and continue to work on all of these issues so that you can be, healthy and happy as you go on this journey.
Totally, man. And that's exactly right. That's so well said. I couldn't put it better myself. That's it. And so just for me personally, it was about forgiveness, about letting go, forgiveness of myself. Forgiving yourself is much harder than forgiving other people. And so, yeah, one of my favorite teachers and guides, he always asked me, is like, what are you holding? And it's a great way you check in and think, well, what am I holding? You can think about it and feel it. And so for me, that was really, really big, was moving through forgiveness, guilt, anger, sadness, a variety of different things. And it's an ongoing process, but yeah, Lyme really just blew the top off of things and really opened the dam. And so, through that process of healing my body and emotions and spirit, I just became more and more connected to Chinese medicine, and just found it to be such a helpful, refreshing, and useful lens. This lens of energetics, of viewing the world, understanding all kinds of things, like, the energetics of human interactions, the energetics of the body. There's different times a day, according to Chinese medicine, that's better for exercise, it's better for sexual activity, better for rest. And so I just followed it to a T, and it was very noticeable when I lived in a way that aligned with their advice. With this energetic advice, it felt really, really good. So from there, I went to school, and, that was where a lot of great personal healing came to me. I feel like once I got into the clinic, you heal yourself by healing others. And I see this time and time again in the clinic, is that these people that come for acupuncture are just these unbelievable souls. I mean, just incredible. And it's such a huge honor just to witness them. And it's so obvious to me that they are doing their work, and it's guiding them towards a higher purpose, and so I think the healing process for the patient and the practitioner, no matter where you are in your journey, whether you're a patient and going to be a practitioner later, you're already a practitioner, or you're just starting to be a patient, I think it's ongoing no matter where you are along that spectrum.
So you came to understand a couple of things, right? The first thing is that your toxic bucket had overflown, and you had to make sure that you helped to clean it up. You also came to understand that neurologically, it had overflown as well, right? And one of the things we have to talk about is how we pile on traumas, right? And how our traumas boil over, and how now Lyme sort of becomes the cherry on top of the cake. But it's not just traumas, right? I mean, let's talk about brain development, right? Because we like to focus on these tragic events and define them as traumas, and define them as creating neural pathways that are not serving us. But as it turns out, our neural pathways are being developed during our childhood. The first 7 years of our lives, we're literally absorbing everything in, and we may or may not be properly interpreting, but we then have these neural pathways that develop that are not serving us. Then between the ages of 7 and 13, we are continuing to absorb more and more of these, this information that our senses is bringing to us. And we may or may not be interpreting that properly, and they again may create more pathways that are not serving us. And then between the age of 13 and 25, we're now more aware. We are now certainly blocking out some of what's coming into our brain. But then we have this whole neurology that is built, these whole set of pathways that are not necessarily serving us, and it makes us vulnerable emotionally and spiritually to a disease like Lyme disease, and that becomes the cherry on top of the cake, where we have even more neurological pathways that are not serving us because the response to this disease. So talk about how it's important to be aware of that, and important to understand the importance of dealing with the neurological bucket and the spiritual bucket, so we can put ourselves in a position where we can now heal.
Oh yeah, I mean, you said it, man. I mean, I don't know what else I can say. It's unbelievably important, and I think something that a disease like Lyme will do is that it will break you down to rock bottom, where for a lot of people, I think they just think, okay, I need to seek emotional and spiritual help because I don't know what else to do. It's almost a move out of desperation, where in reality, in actuality, that's exactly what they should be doing. Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. It's of the utmost importance. It's really a lot to juggle, because when you're sick, you're not feeling good. Literally, we use the word neurological. I mean, there's neurological symptoms where people are having a hard time. They can't remember, they can't hold too much in their minds. And so you just find somewhere to start, whether it be someone to talk to, whatever it may be. But yeah, I would put that in the category as important as the physical, which needs to be addressed. And we have people on both sides. Some people say, okay, I'm really sick, or I have a huge bullseye on my shoulder after I got bit by a tick. I'm going to go to a Reiki practitioner. That's great, but also go to a Lyme literate doctor. Address both sides. And then the other side of that would be probably the average tough guy, like we're talking about earlier, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to take the antibiotics and ignore everything else. Whereas really, Lyme, you're confronted with a disease that forces you to just hit it from all fronts, and that can be hard. It can be overwhelming, but you got to start somewhere. And for the folks listening, I would just say there's no better time than now. Even if it seems overwhelming, you won't regret it.
Okay.
Reaching out to somebody, reaching out for help.
So you have two more pieces here. So you now become a practitioner, right? And you
Yeah.
become a practitioner. It does two things for you. It talk to us more about how acupuncture now helps people with the spiritual and the emotional elements of healing.
Yeah, yeah, and just to say, if people are thinking, oh God, where would I even start with this? I think going to an acupuncturist is a great place to start. If you don't want to go to, would it be therapy? I mean, my sister's a therapist, so I don't want to say acupuncture is better than therapy for this, but I do think that acupuncture, you can move a lot of energy really quickly, and so I think it's great. I would say do some therapy and get some acupuncture, just because I don't want Hannah, my sister, to come kick my butt. But yeah, so that's a great place to start for this, and how acupuncture can help. Well, there's whole protocols. Actually, amazingly enough, the VA, the Veterans Association, uses auricular meaning ear. Therapy, acupuncture, to treat veterans. So there's something called the NADA protocol. There's a whole series of ghost treatments, some clearing treatments that you can do, treatments that will bring stuff up to the surface. I mean, you would be blown away at how many people I'll place these clearing treatments. Some of them, I mean, the true translation would be depossession treatment, but we're not necessarily talking about possession in the sense of like angels and demons, even though I think there is, a space where that exists. But just carrying stuff that's not yours. You go into a room, you feel the vibe, you just walk out, you're like, oh, what is this stuff? I mean, you go. A great example would be going to prison. Guys that go into prison, they come out after 6 months and they're carrying a bunch of stuff, energy that's not there. So I think these depossession treatments are extraordinarily powerful, and you'd be amazed. I mean, as soon as the needles go in, people are just crying. I mean, tears just bursting forward, and they say, "Oh my God!" They always apologize. I have no idea what's happening. It's almost can be overwhelming, and so I actually just warn people now. I just say, "Hey, you're probably going to feel some emotions, and let it out." Some people are like self-conscious of it and they try and choke it back, but I would say no, you got let it go. And this is very common, and specifically the category of acupuncturists that really operate in this realm are called 5-element acupuncturists. There's a school in Maryland that is a 5-element school that I'm familiar with. I'm not sure if there's too many other ones. I'm sure there's more than one in the country, but there's a real hotbed of 5-element practitioners around DC, Virginia, Maryland area. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I want to talk about one last thing. I could keep both of you guys all night, but you've been very kind to give us a lot of time. And I do think we're going to have to reassemble and maybe do some podcasts in the future where we're focusing on particular topics. But with that general invitation, without asking for your commitment, I'd like to talk about one last thing that you guys touched upon, which is you started talking about the tribal nature of humans, right? And I want to visit that in the context of emotional and spiritual healing, right? Because in my view, we've been created by God to serve. That's our primary purpose, right? And when we're isolated, two things are happening. The first is we have this emotional response that has been built into us from an evolutionary standpoint. Because we were isolated, we die. So we know that if we're not a part of the tribe, if we've been excluded from the tribe, we die. So emotionally, we cannot be healthy. But I'd argue also, Jacob, that you cannot be spiritually healthy if you're not a part of a tribe, because we are made to serve. And if we're by ourselves, we can't serve other people. So talk to us about how you, Jacob, became more healthy when you found your tribe, both emotionally and physically. Emotionally as a result of feeling safer by being a part of the group and dealing with those those evolutionary feelings that have developed, and how you began to heal spiritually by being able to serve other people.
Yeah, well, that's great, man. I mean, I remember when I was starting to have to step away from my group of about 50 party friends out of necessity because I was so sick. And then I was talking to my buddy Tim, my acupuncturist, during one treatment, and he said, "Hey man, on this side of the fence, it's a little bit more lonely. If you're on the healthy side of the fence, you're not going to be surrounded by 45 or 50 guys every weekend like you once were." But what happened to me through that evolution was actually linking up and being around people that really actually cared about me. And it's a rough process, because so many of us, we just see it today culturally. there's a lot of fair weather friends, social media friends. When you go through something really hard, then you're broken down to rock bottom, and then you see who really is left standing there. And it's usually a very small group of people, and then from there you go, and at least for me, I should say, from there I went and started to slowly, organically, create and form connections and friendships that were real, with people. And of course my brothers from back in the day were still there for me, but they were off partying, doing their thing. So the connection and the tribe that I ended up being fortunate enough to have around me was built out of healthy shared experience, and it was a lot more real. And so that was a huge part of the healing. And I think the second part of your question was, how healing others, was that it?
How being around other people and serving them ultimately allowed you to heal spiritually.
Oh, well, that's it. I mean, that's just being around other people and serving them allowed me to heal spiritually. That's it. It's just, when you are doing something in service, I think you're like a channel. You're connected to, there's light, it's God's light, you could say, coming down through them. When your heart is pure, when you're out there chasing money. And I worked sales jobs for sure, but I had a period of time where I took a break from Chinese medicine, worked in fundraising and sales. And, when you're living to serve yourself, it gets old pretty quick, and that actually drives people to want to go drink. If you all day are slugging it out and doing sales, it's at least for me, it was not fulfilling. And so I think if you can find a way to help others, and anybody listening to this that has Lyme is in the valley, and when you go into the valley, it's like a rites of passage. You can help others. You don't have to be a doctor. I mean, it's just you are able to reach across the aisle and touch other people in a variety of ways, that are also in the valley once you've been there yourself. So if you're hearing this podcast and you've walked through the fight with Lyme, you already have what you need to help others. You don't have to, it's not, a lot of people think, oh, I don't know if I could. The answer is yes, you can. And then, the healing for you comes as well, because then your light is coming down, you're channeling God's light through you, you're helping them, your intention is pure. And you're not walking around day holding me. It's more, you're in a state of service.
So Jacob, I'm going to ask you one last question before I let Ryan ask you his final question. The final question of the podcast is, there are some folks who believe that we are coming to an enlightened time collectively, that there is this crossover between neurology, psychology, and traditional spiritual teachings, and as that's coming together, we're becoming more enlightened. And I'm wondering how someone named Jacob, the man who is at the center of all traditional religions, the man who had to wrestle with God in order to ultimately find his purpose, how this journey that you've been on, are you sort of a manifestation of this sort of crossover of all of these different teachings coming together?
And man, I just want to say, super humble, but I think I am pretty much I think I confuse a lot of people. It's good to be a Renaissance man. It's like people look at me and think, oh, you must be a police officer, you drive a truck and you have a pistol in your glove box, but you're also an acupuncturist that talks about spiritual healing, and you pray and all these things. So yeah, I think exactly, I'm extremely thankful for all of the epic experiences I've had the opportunity to walk through and survive, and through that I do feel we're at a crossover, for me personally and culturally. Absolutely, I see that, and as we expand and evolve, we should expect that. We should expect. And there's a great book. It's called The Quantum and the Lotus, and I think it's where a Buddhist monk and an astrophysicist trade places. The astrophysicist moves to the monastery, and the Buddhist monk goes and studies, some kind of crazy mathematics. And they meet up and they have a conversation, and they kind of say, "Oh, I think the Eastern spiritual tradition and quantum physics is kind of saying the same thing." So I think as we evolve and expand our consciousness, we're going to see more overlap, more integration.
Isn't it interesting that so many traditions find their tradition as a vehicle for disagreeing with one another, and some of the crazy things we're seeing in the Middle East, when in fact every single tradition, no matter what tradition you study, Eastern or Western, traditional or non-traditional, are actually saying exactly the same thing, just from a different perspective. And again,
Totally.
a guy named Jacob, right? And again, our listeners know that I've been studying the Torah for the last 2 years. A man named Jacob is here now discussing Eastern philosophy, right? And how there's no conflict. It's actually every single tradition is teaching exactly the same thing. You just have to look for it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. And, it's just, again, a huge honor to be here with your audience and talk to you guys. And yeah, it's, as Ryan mentioned, it's very therapeutic and cathartic to go back and talk about some of the stuff. And, I've always felt like, and I've had many people tell me like, man, you've lived a really unique life. And I think so many of us out there have, and I think so many of the listeners are probably in the same boat, in that life is very complex. We're confronted with all kinds of different things, and there's something good and great opportunity in all the challenges life is not simple, especially these days. And so, yeah, I think we should just expect to see that more and more as we, go forward in time, in our lifetimes, in our children's lifetimes, and hopefully we can keep up with it. I'm an optimist, and have great faith in the goodness of the human heart, in the magic and light and God's love in our world. Yeah, those are my guiding forces for sure. But I think I probably veered off topic here a little bit. But
no, I think you're right on topic. But we're going to now, because you've both been so kind to us here at Tick Boot Camp, and to our listeners, we're going to let Ryan ask you the final question, and we're going to wind down this podcast.
Okay. Wow. So this has been really, really, I guess, really it's really relative to me. Like, I feel like you and I have a lot of similarities. And one of the things that I love, that you've come from a place where you were partying, having these experiences with drugs and fast, crazy lifestyle, and this illness slapped you down and and your body said, no, you can't do this anymore. You're going to have to find another path, because this isn't going to work. And so I'd love to depart with our listeners from one of my favorite quotes for anybody that feels like, hey, I'm a good person, but you're making mistakes, and you've made mistakes, and you're dwelling on them, and you're not, people really get what they've done in life and how they've made mistakes. And one of my favorite quotes, because we go through so much evil in life, is it just, the world is a terrible place. And an old Native American quote that resonates with me, that when I think about the mistakes I've made, and then the things I've done that are good, and why I do the things that are bad or good, it comes down to free will and choice. And so the quote goes, an old Cherokee told his grandson, my son, there's a battle between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, jealousy, greed, resentment, inferiority, lies, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, empathy, and truth. The thought and asked, grandfather, which wolf wins? And the old man quietly replied, the one you feed. And I just think that's so true. I mean, it's, you feed that yin and yang. We all have the capabilities for grace or for pure evil. And so what I want to know is, if you had to go back and do it all over again, and you had to go and experience this, would you go through it? Or if you could go back and it didn't happen to you, would you erase that part of your life? And why or why not?
Absolutely not, man. I would definitely not erase it. I would go through it again. Because not only did it completely redirect the course of my life, it actually brought me to everything good in my life. The people that I'm around, the way that I think, my love and passion for exercise, my career that supports myself and my family, the people in my life, all these things, that are so good and so rich and so powerful, came from the absolutely difficult and brutal experience of Lyme. And and so I wouldn't change a thing. And now I'm able to serve others. And I feel like man, I went through, the fire. I didn't give up. There were times that I felt like I was right on the edge, and I would pray, I want to stay. I'm meant to stay. It's not time for me to go. And so was thankfully, by the grace of God, able to get through that. And now I can do what I'm really meant to do. I can live the way I'm meant to live. And actually, I think it's our birthright as humans to be able to reach that. But the path there for me was just absolutely scorcher. It was just scorcher. It was beautiful. It was brutal. But now I'm extraordinarily thankful for what I have and the change perspective and all the above. Yeah. And I would just offer to the listeners that are down in the fire, in the fight, they're exhausted. They've been fighting, 5, 10, 15, some people 20 plus years. I would just say, hang on to your light. Don't give up. Hang on to your light.